Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lorie Jones, president of Fidelis Wealth Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
Good morning, Fearless Females. Thank you so much for joining and listening with us. I appreciate that so much. So every once in a while in your life, you're going to meet someone who you just click with, like automatically. You didn't know them before, and probably if you look back 2 or 3 years later, you can't remember a time in your life when they weren't there and important. And this next guest is actually that person. Her name is Dana Kirchmar, and she is brilliant. And she's got a strong passion for women in aviation that mirrors my own for women in finance. So I have a lot in common with her, and she is just amazing. She calls herself audacious as she worked at age 2021 to launch a shuttle into space. And I asked her afterwards, you'll hear this in the interview. I'm like, what did you do after that? Like, isn't that like the ultimate career high? Like, what is left to do after that? And I loved, as I give these introductions, I kind of try and pick out my favorite quote or something like that to share with you. And honestly, there's so many in her interview that I want to share all of them. But one of my favorites is she talks about being authentic. Not everybody's going to love you, but you're going to love yourself. Don't shape shift to fit someone else's mold. So I am so excited that we get to hear her story. Let's get started. Good morning, and thanks for joining us on Fearless Females again. I'm excited about our guest today, Dana Kirchmar. She's the founder and CEO of the Elevate Initiative. And I had a chance to just chat with Dana a couple of days ago, and I was so excited to hear her story. I could not wait to get her on the program. So thank you so much for joining us and doing this for us. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to hearing your story. So I always start with the same question, and it's because I'm a reader. I love reading. Tell me about your favorite book.
So my favorite book is actually a book that I'm reading right now, and I have to look at it so I can tell you the whole title. And it's an older book, but it's called Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. And it's by Susan Cain.
I love it. That's on my list.
Is it? Oh my gosh. So I consider myself an introvert, and there's a whole lot of information in there about why introverts should be in charge of companies, why introverts should be leaders. And it's something that I should have read years ago, but picked it up last week as a matter of fact. And it just really speaks to me. So I cannot recommend it highly enough, especially for introverts. Well, and actually, I think there's something in it for extroverts as well. I mean, we're either one or the other, or a combination of the two. So there are lots of lessons to be learned.
Yeah, I was listening to something, I don't remember what, the other day, and it was talking about introverts, extroverts, and ambiverts. Apparently, they walk the line, and I've always considered myself a bit of an introvert too. I'm so happy with my spreadsheets and my financial predictions.
Right.
People are a little scary sometimes, but they're always nice. So
Absolutely.
So I love it. I'll move that closer to the top of my list because I've been meaning to get to that one. So that's a great recommendation. So tell me a little bit about your journey, Dana. Talk about how you got where you're at today and kind of how you got started and just tell me a little bit about who you are.
So I'm actually a Colorado native. There aren't that many of us, but I grew up in Arvada, Colorado. I went to college at Colorado State University, and I studied electrical engineering. I had absolutely no idea what an electrical engineer did, even kind of when I graduated. I mean, I knew what I had learned, but I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And it was 1997, and so it was not a good year for engineers to find jobs. And so I kind of fell back on my high school, college summer job of being a bank teller until I finally got a job at Martin Marietta at the time, which is now Lockheed Martin. And I was assigned to work on a classified satellite. So that entailed all kinds of interesting stories around getting a security clearance and training and all kinds of interesting things. But at that point in time, I was 23 years old. I was completely audacious. I was afraid of nothing. And our spacecraft was getting ready to go to Cape Kennedy, actually to the Canaveral Space Station, because it was a military launch. And I was bound and determined, even though I had been at the company for less than a year, I was bound and determined that I was going to be on that team. So I went out of my way to volunteer for things. I would put on a full bunny suit and go out into the clean room in the high bay and work on the spacecraft and not care what I looked like and what my hair looked like when I came out, which that's a big deal for an 80s girl with big hair. So I pretty much made myself indispensable, and I was chosen to go work on the launch. So that kind of culminated in being in payload mission control for the first classified space shuttle launch. And I was in there to say go or no go for my particular system. So it's like you see in the movies, that stuff really does happen. They really do have countdowns like that. And that was really a highlight. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm 24 years old now. And what comes next? I had no idea
how do you
what
top
would come
that,
next.
right?
Exactly at that age. Well, they paid for my clearance, which had cost a lot of money, and they didn't want me to move around. And I'm one of those people that are easily bored. If I worked for Boeing, I couldn't just be the window shade girl. I could, I would have to do more things. And because they had paid for such an expensive clearance, they wouldn't let me move around within the company. So I ultimately ended up quitting and going to work for Honeywell in Phoenix. So basically, I went from aerospace, 10 years in aerospace, to being an entry-level engineer again at an aviation company. And to this day, I don't really know why I was hired, except that I have really good interview skills. I feel like I have exemplary people skills for being an introvert, but for being an engineer as well. And so the role that I was hired into was an applications engineer for Cessna Citation Avionics. And within 3 years, it was absolutely a perfect fit for me. Within 3 years, I went from being the entry-level engineer to being the technical manager for all of the avionics for the Cessna Citation business jets. And so that included primary flight displays, but I was actually an autopilot specialist. So most of the people on my team got sick doing flight testing, and I didn't get sick. So I was doing all of the flight testing for 7 programs at the same time.
Oh, wow. That would make me sick.
As part of that, I am one of the designers of the Citation 10 autopilot, which at that point in time was the fastest business jet in the world. It cruised at 0.92 Mach. It also flew to 51,000 feet. So as part of my flight testing, I got to fly that high where the sky is actually a different color and you can start to see the curvature of the Earth. We were working on an autopilot overspeed protection where the nose of the plane is supposed to automatically come up so it never goes over the 0.92 Mach. And so I was standing in the cockpit between the two pilots and I was watching the gauges and we were going down, and it got to 9.3, 9.4, 9.5. At 0.97, the pilot said, "Your control is not working," and he pulled the airplane back. So I brag that I've flown to 0.97 Mach standing up in the cockpit of a business jet. So that's kind of a funny story. Anyway, so I stayed at Honeywell for about 8 years. As much as I loved my job, because I did, I adored it. Phoenix was not my home, and I
Oh my
wanted to be
goodness.
back here.
Oh yeah, I've lived in Phoenix after Denver, and Phoenix is not my happy place too. I understand that.
No, definitely not. And so I was looking about once a month on monster.com, which was the way to find a job then. And there was a job that I saw that was for an avionics and electrical engineering manager for a startup aircraft company in Denver. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. So I sent my resume in, heard back from the hiring manager in less than 10 minutes, and was getting ready to get on a plane at the end of the week to come out for the interview. And I thought, startup, I'd only worked for those two really big companies. I wasn't sure about the startup. I thought, this is a chance for me to go home and see my parents on somebody else's dime, and the interview experience will be good. And so I didn't really think that it was a job that I was going to take. And I will tell you that within 30 minutes of meeting the people, I knew it was a job that I couldn't turn down. So it was a panel interview, which I had never been part of. So I was sitting across the table from 8 other people, just getting questions, but it didn't feel like a grilling. It felt like a conversation. And I found out after the fact that they all kind of felt the same way about me. They said, well, they knew after about 5 minutes, they just wanted to go out and have beer and pizza.
Oh, that's great.
That was a really good opportunity. And I accepted that job and moved back to Denver. And I was actually the 17th employee of that company. And we designed and built that aircraft, flew it. It flew several times. And then the economic crash of 2007 happened, and we ran out of money. So that was my startup, my first startup that went out of business. So from there, I went to work for a company called GoGo. At the time, it was called AirCell. And now it's GoGo Business Aviation, and they provide internet on airplanes. So if you've ever flown on American or United and you've used their internet, that's what I did, only I did it for business jets. I stayed there for about 10 years. I went to work for another startup company. There's not much to say about it. It was a 1-year stint, and we raised some money, but we didn't raise enough money to keep it going. So then I ended up working for Smart Sky Networks, which is a competitor to GoGo, also providing internet service on airplanes. So those are kind of the things that I did, but really who I am is so much bigger than that, because throughout those 37 years of being in aviation and aerospace, first of all, I feel like I'm kind of a unicorn because I've been in those businesses for so long. Women generally don't stay. And I've experienced pretty much the whole scale of what I could have experienced there. And so now my mission is to exponentially increase the number of women in aviation and aerospace, and to change the face of aviation and aerospace and to make it look more feminine. So that is how I'm spending my time. And I've got a business that I started up several years ago that's kind of rolling into full gear now, coaching both the young women and giving them tips and tricks from my career, as well as working with the C-level managers to help them determine what they need to do to make their culture female friendly in order to help them retain and attract female talent.
Now you know, Dana, why I was so excited to have you on the program. It's like our interests align completely on that. I have been, one of the very few women in the room, not as bad as aviation. You were telling me some statistics tell me the statistics again, 7%?
So 3% of the C-suite are women, and only 7% of the population in aviation and aerospace are women. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
It is. It's just, and especially in 2024, we could do better, right? I love that you're working on that and trying to do better. So did you ever top your 24-year-old experience in the whole career so far? There's still time.
Absolutely. I've had so many once in a lifetime experiences. I don't know that I ever topped that one just because of everything that was wrapped up in it. I had to have a cover story. I couldn't show my identification to pick up a rental car. At the rental car place, they gave me a map to a bungalow on the beach where the security people would go through my suitcase to make sure that I didn't have anything that made it look like I was from Colorado. We used retina scans to get into facilities that we were going to, which, I mean, that's not really even mainstream today. And that was, 30 years ago. I had the run of the launch pad. So frequently I worked the graveyard shift. And so I would be out there at 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and the big spotlights were shining on the shuttle from below. And I could go anywhere I wanted. And so I would go and stand at the bottom of the space shuttle, the rockets, and just look up at it. And then there's a catwalk up at the very top of it that you can get almost to the top of it. And so I would climb the catwalk. I think it was like 197 or that it's in feet, what level you're at. So I think it was 196 or 197. And I would go up there and just look down. And I would think, oh my gosh, I am getting paid to do this. This is like completely crazy. So as much as I've gotten to do a lot of really cool things in my career, I mean, I've flight tested on so many jets. I've been on so many business jets. I can't even name them all, which is really fun as well. But the whole experience, and also being, 24 years old and being kind of fearless. And I called myself audacious. And I have that up above my desk now, the word audacious, because I feel like the longer I went through my career, the more safe I got and the less audacious I was. And it's a reminder to me to go back to being that 24-year-old girl who didn't know better than to say, hey, call on me. I want to go to the Cape.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, that's so exciting. Tell me a little bit about investment that you made in yourself that you're so glad that you made. Like, you look back on your life and you're like, if I hadn't have done that, I would just not be where I am today.
So I think there are two that I would talk about. The first one was hiring a career coach. So that was definitely a financial investment for me. I wish that I would have done it much earlier in my career. I have prided myself on being independent and not having to ask for help. And I think in a lot of ways that was, it hurt me to not be open to having some sort of coaching. The biggest investment that I have made is not a financial investment. It's a time investment. And so in addition to my corporate job and what I'm trying to pull together, I'm on the board of the Wings Over the Rockies Air and Space Museum, which is all about educating the public about aviation, past and present. Its mission is education, and that's so near and dear to my heart. As part of that, I'm on the Captain Jeppesen Foundation as well, and what we do is we provide full flight scholarships to students between the ages of 15 and 19. So this is the fourth year that we've done it, and it's gotten bigger and bigger every year. This year we had 131 applicants. We interviewed 54 in person. Those are some long weekends interviewing.
That's a
these
lot.
kids. They were amazing. And we were able to award 28 $14,000 scholarships. So that I love doing that. And then the last thing is really, I'm the secretary of the school board for Colorado Skies Academy, which is a middle school that's actually dedicated. It's a STEM middle school dedicated to aviation and aerospace, and it's located on the airport at Centennial Airport here. And so I'm really involved with filling the pipeline with young women in all of the different areas, and kind of in a position to hold their hand as they make their journey from just learning about education or aviation as a young girl, all the way to helping to mentor them once they get their first job. And that is the investment of my time. That
Yeah.
is the best investment that I've ever made. All of that.
Yeah, I hear you. I can hear the passion as you talk about aviation and especially women in aviation. And it strikes me so close to home because I have that same passion for women in finance. I'm like, they should developing that young talent and helping them to grow. I always say I'm kind of a mom by profession because you grow the young talent and watch them become, and that gives you such joy to see them be successful and what a difference you're making in their life too.
And it's making such a big difference in my life. I mean, my life is so much richer now than it was before. I mean, honestly, I love to give them a lift up, but I get as much from it as they do. Absolutely, no doubt.
And that's a good secret, that something that's kind of a secret sort of plus or bonus is that, yeah, like you do feel that sense of accomplishment as they accomplish, as they succeed. And I find that many of my fearless females that have been on the show have that same sort of, that want and desire to help empower women in all different industries. They don't have as many 93% to go in your industry.
Yeah. Right. Got a ways to go.
yeah. You got a little bit further to go than a lot of them, but I love that sense of watching the future because they're so interesting and they teach you so much, and they do so much fun.
Well, and also I've gotten so much out of this industry myself that I want to give back to it now. I want to, this is something that I love. I mean, I am truly passionate about aviation. I think it attracts really special people. I think they're wonderful jobs. They're high-paying jobs. I mean, there are just a lot of reasons to keep young ladies moving in this direction.
Yeah, well, I love that. Tell me, Dana, what is the worst advice someone gave you on your journey here? And did you take the advice or did you not take the advice?
I have thought about this question a lot, and I don't know that I've ever gotten bad advice. I mean, I've had a lot of advocates and I've had a lot of mentors. I will tell you that this probably doesn't fall under the term of advice, but it was early in my career, and I was looking for a mentor. And there was a woman who was in software development at the company that I worked for, and I asked her, "Would you mentor me, please?" And she looked me square in the face. And she said, "I didn't have any help to get where I got to. Why should I help you?" And turned around and walked away. And obviously that was not advice, but it kind of set the tone for me. It kind of, that probably is where I realized that was not what I wanted to be. I wanted to help lift other women. I think because the industry is the way that it is, and there are so few female C-level spots that we as women act like the C-level spots fit into a pie. And if I get my piece of the pie, my spot, then there are less C-level spots for other women.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes that's how we treat each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really answer your question. I think it was a lesson learned about what I wouldn't ever do.
Yeah. I love that. And essentially what you're trying to do is make a bigger pie, right?
Right.
So that there are more seats at the table for women to have. And I have found that our generation, those that are breaking glass ceilings and moving into these industries that are traditionally male dominated, especially, our age, are looking to help because maybe the generation before us was really concentrating on breaking the glass ceiling and
Absolutely
didn't have enough capacity to help out.
Absolutely. And even more than growing the pie is like building more pies. I mean, making more opportunities. I think that's kind of the big thing. I don't believe that the men are intentionally keeping the women from rising or from becoming leaders. I think they just don't think about it. I mean, I think, I think there's some thinking that the DEI program will take care of that. And that's just not the case. If you don't see a career path for yourself, if you don't see a woman doing a role that you want to do, then it kind of tamps you down and makes you think, why should I bother? And I think that's a lot of why so many women leave aviation and aerospace is because there just aren't that many female role models. So we need to be the role models that we didn't have.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I agree with you as well. I say all the time, I'm like, there are husbands and fathers and uncles and brothers, and they all want those women in their life to be successful and to be able to reach the stars, to do anything they want to do.
Yeah.
They just sometimes need some help. Like,
Absolutely.
how do we encourage that? I've talked to just a bunch of financial advisors because we're about 20% women in the financial advising space. And I've talked to a bunch of male financial advisors, and they're like, we'd hire a woman. Show us one. Give us one.
Yeah. Right. That's the whole thing about building the pipeline and having young women, that's what they want to do. And then continuing to nurture them along the whole path, not letting them go.
Yeah. Encouraging and supporting and growing and mentoring. And yes, giving them, I was reading a book, Outliers, and it talks about how some of the biggest prediction of success, they've got like successful little enclaves in engineering or medicine or something like that. And one of the biggest predictors of being successful is being able to see neighbors and mentors and people that look like you in those roles.
Right.
And then that gives you the sense as a young child that, hey, I could do that too. I could be that person. So
yeah, exactly.
What about regrets? And I guess I'm not going to say regrets, but is there a situation that you can kind of look back on and you're like, oh my goodness, knowing what I know now, I definitely would have done that differently. Like you go through it again, knowing the same things, you're probably going to do the same thing. But knowing what you know now, is there a situation that you would go back and do over?
Absolutely. So I was working so hard. I was so invested in my career, and I was working so hard to be seen as being as good as the men that I was working with. I felt like I had to do more. It's not necessarily that more was being asked of me, but it was something that I had put on myself that, I need to show that I can do more. I can do better. I was so focused on that, Lorie, that I didn't stop and say, hey, I didn't get married. Hey, I didn't have kids. Exactly. Wait. Until it was too late. And really, I don't know that I probably would not have thought about that at all had I not found myself unemployed at one point in time. And I had a coach at the time who very intelligently asked me, what do you do for fun? How do you spend your time when you're not working? And I could not answer her. I mean, I cried my eyes out. I couldn't answer her. And then I'm thinking, okay, now I'm too old to have kids. Now, I can certainly get married. I have been with my partner for 27 years. So it's not like I guess I didn't have a ceremony, but I didn't have kids, which is a big regret. And now I'm very intentional, and I'm very intentional in my coaching about this as well. I'm very intentional that at least once a quarter, I go back and I take a look at what my goals are for the rest of this year, for 3 years, for 5 years, and look at where I am, look at whether those goals are still my goals, and redo my plan for the next quarter to make sure that I stay in line with what I want. And I think that if I had done that earlier in my career, I certainly would have wanted to have children. I would have wanted wanted to raise a family. But by the time it crossed my mind, it was too late because I was so focused on my career. And so I think we all evolve. But if we don't take the time, the intentional time to look at where we are, we don't know if we need to evolve. We don't, we may have evolved in a different direction and we may need to course correct or there's something else we may want to do. So I think I was not very introspective about my life. Like if you would have asked me who I was, I would say I'm an electrical engineer or I'm a rocket scientist or and that's not who I am. That's what I do. But that was really the point that I had gotten to. And that one thing was directing all of my decisions. Every decision that I made had to do with how is this going to support my career. And I lost out on a lot of things that I would have liked to have had.
Oh, that's so interesting that you say that. I just ran into a situation. My youngest graduated from high school and I was I'm very goal driven and goal oriented and probably fit that analytical engineering mindset a little better than the empathetic sort of mindset. And so she wanted to go swimming with the sharks, go snorkeling. And I was running into an issue where I only had one person in the office that day. I was working remotely and I only had one person in the office. And I was trying to decide, like, do I go swimming with the sharks with my daughter? Or do I stay and help out at the office in case there's an emergency? And I really did have to look at my life and my goals and who I wanted to be and say, you know what? I am never, and none of my clients will ever remember if I was in the office for 2 hours that day, but I will always remember swimming with the sharks with my daughter. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that idea of taking stock of your life and finding out if you're on track or off track is so, so important.
It absolutely is.
I love that you mentioned that. Thank you. Dana, what is one thing, if you could go back and talk to your 20-year-old self or early on in this journey, 23, 24, 25, like I really am not whatever age you want to choose, but what would you tell her?
I would tell her, first of all, stay audacious. Don't let anything take away your self-confidence and your belief in yourself. And along with that goes, do not shapeshift. Do not become something that you think somebody else wants you to be in order to fit their mold. Mm-hmm. Be authentic. Not everybody's going to love you, but you're going to love yourself. And so don't shapeshift. Do not change your life to be someone who you authentically are not.
Oh, that's so valuable, I think. I know that you're expected to, I'm sure you found this in your career as well. In my career, you're kind of expected to look and act and do things a certain way because that's the way they've always been done. And it is traditionally male dominated. So mostly it's their way. So, the idea of being a mom or maybe dressing a little more vibrantly or something like that, that doesn't come into my world. And it's not authentically me. And so I have to fight that a lot of times. Did you find that?
I did. Absolutely. And one of the things that came out of that TDY trip that I was on to the Cape, I was the only woman with a bunch of men. And we were there for 6 months, came home for a weekend every 3 weeks or so. But I was in a position where I was not able to talk to my family members. They couldn't even know where I was. So the only people that I had that I could have conversations with were the people that I worked with, and they were all men. And so I shapeshifted and became one of the guys so that I would have people to go have dinner with, so that I would have people to do things with on the weekend. So that, I acted as if I was okay with things that I was not okay with because I didn't want to be shunned, for lack of a better word, shunned from the group, because then who would I have? I mean, it set up a situation where I was either going to conform or I was going to be alone. And some other things came out of that weren't so good either. But that's kind of where my whole shape shifting message comes from. I mean, there are lots of times looking back now where I think, well, I didn't need to go have drinks with the guys after work. I would be plenty happy sitting on my balcony overlooking the beach with a book. And that was who I authentically was,
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And so you learned through that journey that you needed to stay authentic to who you were and sit on the beach with a book rather than making yourself into someone you weren't in order to fit in.
Yep, exactly.
And providing probably a space that other women might feel more comfortable being who they are.
Absolutely.
What scared you the most when you started this career? And does it still scare you?
I think what scared me was not knowing if I had the exact skill set that I needed. I have dealt, including now, I have dealt my entire career with impostor syndrome. And I think I didn't have a good idea when I was leaving college that it would be okay. You're going into a job and they're going to teach you what you need to learn. When I started hiring people, it didn't matter to me what kind of if I was looking for an engineering role, it didn't matter to me whether they were an electrical or mechanical or whatever. It was because they got the background that you get in an engineering degree. So I think what scared me was not knowing exactly what I needed to do from day one and being found out as an imposter. And I still kind of have that every now and then. It's still kind of, even 37 years into my career, I'm thinking, do I have well, now I think it has to do with technology. I mean, I'm technology moves so quickly, and am I going to be able to learn this new technology fast enough to keep up with these young folks? And so that's, I think a lot. It goes to imposter syndrome and being scared that I have the right skill set to actually do the job well.
I had to sit down with a group that I joined just recently, and I was having a problem, and they had to give me a talk. They're like, Lorie, you've been doing the job for like 2 years. Like you're doing it. You don't have to worry that you're not good at it. You're doing it.
Right.
And so I think that, and I know that with my young women that are kind of coming up in finance, that they struggle with that too. What if I don't know enough? What if I'm not good enough? And I guess other than just helping support, telling them nice things about themselves and giving them, encouragement, like, is there any way that is there a magic potion that you figured out to combat that imposter syndrome?
I am really big on celebrating successes. And I'm not talking about big successes. I'm talking about the smallest thing that I accomplish in a day, I celebrate. If there is one thing on my list of things that I want to get done today and I finish that one thing, man, I go have a piece of chocolate. I go for a walk around the block. I play my favorite song. I am huge. I don't think we remember to celebrate ourselves enough. So think about when you have a baby and a baby rolls over for the first time. It's like it's like a big party. Oh, the baby, and the same thing when the baby takes the first steps. Whoa, you took your first steps. We need to celebrate ourselves like that. We need to find times like that for ourselves where we celebrate ourselves and get crazy, ridiculously happy about finishing something and a little thing, just a little thing. It doesn't have to be the end of a big project. It could just be the end of a day.
I love that. I adore that. We just started something here called the signing party. So when they sign their paperwork to come on, we throw like a confetti party.
Nice. Nice. That's awesome. It's the same idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's like, and it is important if you look back and say, you know what, I've come so far. I'm doing so well. I love that you brought that up, Dana. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I think that's so important to, and maybe toot your horn a little bit, hey, guess what I got done today?
Absolutely.
So, what about? I know the answer to this question is probably yes, but did you face any unique challenges because you were a woman?
Oh yes, I have probably experienced pretty much everything you could experience as a woman in a male dominated industry. I'm actually writing a memoir right now. And because I've told my stories about the crazy stuff that happened when I was working at the Cape and flying to 51,000 feet, people were always saying, Dana, you need to write a book. And I started to write it from a perspective of look at how awesome it is to be a woman in STEM and STEAM and so that's how I initially started writing it. As I got further into it, I realized that I couldn't tell those stories completely accurately if I wasn't telling the rest of the story that was maybe not so great that was behind the story. And so that book has completely morphed now. And there's one big event that happened to me in my career that kind of changed my career, kind of has had a very big effect on my life. And so that now is the thread that runs through the book with other things coming on top of it. And I'm writing originally when it was the Little Mary Sunshine book, I was writing it for the young women that I wanted to inspire. Now I'm writing it for, as you said before, I'm writing it for the fathers, for the brothers, for the uncles, I'm writing it for the young women to see how fun it can be, but also to have everybody have their eyes wide open that this is what it is. And oh, by the way, this isn't something that happened 30 years ago. This is something that's still going on. And so I'm in a really big hurry to finish this book because I think it's really important. And so, yeah, there are, I will say that I would not have stayed for 37 years if the positives did not outweigh the negatives. But some of the negatives were very negative. And I feel like part of my mission is educating the men on what the women experience and how they experience our industry so very differently than how we experience it.
I think that struck a chord. My sister was one of my very first fearless females, and she's an engineer. And she gave her presentation and she got done and she's like, I was asking my husband whether or not I should tell them the nitty gritty real truth. And she ended up not. She didn't go into that. But she's like, I've been in some situations that were not ideal, is maybe a best way of putting them. And I think that's really brave to kind of come out and say, hey, this is the reality of what I faced in this industry. And it may not be everybody's reality, but we could change and help it not be the next generation's reality.
Right, exactly. And it certainly played a part in shaping who I am today. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, it does. And I love that there are people that are fearless and will stand up and kind of shine a light on what is going on.
Yeah.
So I'll look forward to that. We'll add it to our book list when it comes out.
Thank you. That sounds great. Thank you.
So, Dana, what are you most proud of?
I am most proud of my resilience. I have worked for very large Fortune 50 even companies. I have worked for very small startup companies. And I realized that my preference was smaller startup companies. And there is a lot of risk that goes along with that. So in my career, I've worked for 4 startup companies. One of them actually remained in business and 3 of them didn't. And I am proud this was not always the case with me. This is what I have evolved to. I have evolved to seeing the gift or the opportunity in every situation, including in losing my job.
Yeah.
And that's a hard one because there's a lot of emotions that go along with losing your job, even if it has nothing to do with you. Getting fired and being laid off are essentially the same things. But in a layoff situation, there's really not. You can't take that personally, but it is a very scary place to be. So it's a scary place to be. And I'm pretty proud of my resilience.
Is there any tactics or something that it's just celebrating those wins that get you through, or is there something that you
It is celebrating the wins. It's also another thing that I do when I finish a project. So obviously I'm going to celebrate the little tiny things in between, but when I finish a big project or even when my startup goes out of business, I get out a journal and I write, and I kind of try to do a chronological kind of, here are the things to take away from this that you learned. This may feel bad right now, but look at all the goodness that came out of that. And then you have it written down. And on the days where you're having not such a great day, you can go back and remind yourself of how resilient you were. And that's
great.
what I do.
Yeah, that is a great idea because everyone, it's inevitable. You're going to have those ups and downs in your life. And if you have those things that you learned or things that you did well or something that you are proud of, and you've got I was thinking the other day, I was like, who can I call to tell me something nice about myself? I was having one of those down days.
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking
absolutely.
about?
You can call me anytime. Please do.
Well, that would have been a really good situation to have a journal where I can look back and say, these are all the really great things I'm good at, or things that I've learned, or things that I've done, or that I'm proud of. I like that. That's great. So any advice for a young woman? It sounds like you mentor young women, so you probably do this all day, every day. But is there any advice for a young woman who's just kind of starting on the early part of this path that you're so successful at that you want to give her?
Yeah, I think what is the basis of everything and is the biggest lesson that I have learned is to take some time and go through and determine what your values are. What are the things that are important to you and what are going to be your North Stars for every decision that you make going along your life. And then a little bit deeper than just the values is, what are your non-negotiables? What are the things that you are and are not going to be, do, allow? Be clear in what your non-negotiables are and be clear enough in them that you can communicate them comfortably to other people. That's a really big lesson that I learned. I had really mushy boundaries, and then my mushy boundaries became somebody else's expectations of me, which then created problems. So I think one of the really best things to do when you're first starting out is sit down, and you can Google values online and pick your top 10 or whatever. I mean, it's not a difficult exercise to go through, but then take that list of values, come up with your non-negotiables, and use that as the basis for your quarterly. Hey, I'm going to look back on where I am. These are my values. Is this still true for me? Are this all? It's just a really great way to know what you want, to know what you don't want, and to keep track of where you are and make sure that you're living in line, both in your career and in your life, in line with what your values are.
I love how you've kind of connected the two as well. Like, your career and your life are not separate things.
Right, exactly.
And especially, if you love what you do, they are intertwined. They're going to cross over. They're going to be together. And you need to make sure that you're heading in the right direction for both of them, so that you don't forget to get married if you want to.
Exactly.
Kids or
exactly. Oops. Exactly.
So thank you so much, Dana, for joining me today. And I really enjoyed our conversation, and I've learned so much. So thank you for doing this for me. If I have listeners that want to get in touch with you and take advantage of your knowledge or ask you questions, how do they do that?
My email address is Dana, DANA, at danakirchmar.com. And that's DANAKIRCHMAR.com. And my website is danakirchmar.com. And there are all kinds of ways to connect with me through my website as well.
Oh, perfect. I am going to keep in touch because I want to see how this next phase goes. I'm so excited to see how you make a difference in the aviation industry with women. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for giving me the time and the platform to talk about what's so important to me. So thank you very much, Lorie.